All right, let's just get right into it. You know that feeling, right? That kind of creepy, uncanny sense that your phone knows way too much about you? Like a private conversation suddenly isn't so private anymore? At least, not to advertisers. So we're going to unpack that exact feeling.
I mean, you know the scenario. You're just chatting with a friend about maybe needing a new tent, for a camping trip that's not even on the calendar yet. And then, a few hours later, you pop up on your phone and bam, there it is. An ad for the exact kind of tent you were just talking about. It's weird. It's super specific. And it makes you wonder, is my phone actually listening to me? Look, if you've thought that, you are definitely not alone. It's so common, in fact, that a whole team of scientists, these guys from universities in the US, the Netherlands, and Poland, got super fascinated by it. They launched an investigation not to figure out if it's really happening, but to understand why so many of us are convinced that it is. And this explainer? It's all about what they discovered.
All right, Section 1, that creepy feeling. Let's start by putting an official name to this very, very modern anxiety.
So, the term these researchers use is electronic eavesdropping, or, e-eavesdropping for short. And what that means, really, is just this specific belief, that your phone, your tablet, whatever, is actively and secretly listening to your offline conversations, all to show you personalized ads.
Okay, moving on to Section 2, the 4 main theories. So is that it? Is eavesdropping the only explanation? Well, the study found that people actually have 4 main theories to make sense of this whole thing. Let's break them down. Yeah, it's not as simple as a yes or no, I believe it or I don't. It's way more complex. The researchers basically identified 4 different explanations for what might be going on. You can kind of think of them as 4 competing suspects in a big mystery. Okay, first up, we've got the prime suspect, eavesdropping. This is the most direct theory, right? Your phone's microphone is on, it's recording what you say, and that data is being used to sell you stuff. It's a really straightforward explanation, even though tech companies have, repeatedly said they don't do this without you knowing.
Next is theory number 2, priming. Now, this one's interesting because it's not about your phone's ears. It's about your own brain. The idea here is that your conversation about, say, a new tent primes you. The ad might have been there the whole time. You would have just scrolled right past it. But because you just talked about it, your brain is now totally focused and ready to notice.
Then you've got theory 3, just pure, simple coincidence. Think about it. You see thousands of ads every single day for all kinds of things. Statistically speaking, it's almost guaranteed that sooner or later, one of those ads is going to randomly match up with something you recently chatted about. It's just a numbers game.
And finally, theory 4, and honestly, this might be the most powerful one of all, digital traces. This theory says that companies don't need to listen because, well, they already have a mountain of your data. Your search history, what you click on, the videos you watch, where you go, all these little digital breadcrumbs create an incredibly accurate profile of who you are and what you're into. You talk about stuff you're interested in, sure, but you also search for it. And they're just targeting your searches.
So that brings us to Section 3, what the data shows. We've got our 4 theories, but which one do people actually believe? This is where the research gets really, really interesting. So to figure this out, the team went out and surveyed 886 people. They did this across 3 different countries, the United States, the Netherlands, and Poland. They really wanted to see if these feelings about surveillance were the same everywhere, or if, culture and where you live plays a part.
And the results? Whoa. They showed one major finding. When people were asked how likely it is that their phone is listening to them for ad purposes, the belief in eavesdropping was way higher in the United States. I mean, by a lot. It was still a majority belief in Poland and the Netherlands, but that US number really, really stands out. So let's just focus on that number for a second. 72%. Nearly 3 out of every 4 people surveyed in the US think it's likely their devices are eavesdropping to sell them ads. That is not some fringe conspiracy theory. That is a mainstream belief.
Okay, Section 4, why this belief spreads. This just begs the question, right? What makes that eavesdropping theory so much more believable than the other ones? Well, the study looked into that too.
So, the researchers found 3 key things that make people really believe in eavesdropping. First, it's all about timing. The faster that ad shows up after your conversation, the more suspicious you get.
Second, it's frequency. If this happens to you all the time, you're probably going to stop thinking it's just a coincidence. And third, it's about your mindset. People who naturally have what the researchers call a higher conspiracy mentality, a tendency to believe that secret plots are behind events, they were way more likely to believe their phones are listening.
And that brings us to our final section, Section 5. So, what's the takeaway? We know it's a widespread belief, and it's backed up by our experiences and how we think. But what's the bottom line here? What does it all mean?
You might be thinking, okay, it's just a belief, so why does it really matter? If the phones aren't actually listening, what's the big deal if people think they are? Well, the researchers argue that the belief itself has some very real consequences.
And this is maybe the most serious impact of all. This belief can create something called a chilling effect. Basically, if we think we're being constantly monitored for commercial reasons, we might start to self-censor. We might avoid talking about certain things or just speak less freely, even in our own homes, just because a smartphone is sitting on the table. It can subtly chip away at our sense of freedom.
So what's the solution? The study suggests it's not just about telling people, hey, don't worry about it. It's about digital literacy. The key is helping people understand the other powerful explanations. When we really get our heads around just how much data our digital traces create and how easily our brains can be primed, well, that eavesdropping theory suddenly seems a lot less necessary.
So, knowing all this, the next time it happens to you, the next time you're talking about dog food and 5 minutes later you see an ad for it, what are you going to think? Are you going to suspect your phone's microphone, or are you going to wonder if you were just primed to notice that ad? Or maybe you'll just remember that you searched for best grain-free puppy food last week. The real answer is probably a lot more complicated than you think.